This video is brought to you by the new Rockin' Stone t-shirts. If you guys would like to get a Rockin' Stone t-shirt, be sure to check out the links in the description below. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ron, and today we're going to be doing a top 10 list for Deep Rock. This is going to be the top 10 funnest new overclocks. So these are all the new overclocks that were added with Season 2. I will not be considering old overclocks that got reworked or changed, so I won't be going over like Sludge Blast since it got reworked and is really strong now, as well as like the impact deflection with the Drac or the aggressive venting. This will be all new overclocks, and I have to say I'm pleasantly surprised with all of the overclocks that we got for the new weapons. I haven't really found any that are outliers of just really bad or feel like they need to get buffed or reworked. They all seem to be at least pretty decent, and there is a lot of fun ones. So this is the top 10. These aren't in a super specific order, and this is all my opinion. Fun is extremely subjective. One person might find something like Mole extremely fun where you just do tons of damage, where somebody else might find HELLFIRE extremely fun because it lights everything on fire. For me, it's usually if the weapon changes a lot, or if it adds something unique to the weapon that the weapon already doesn't have. Coming in at our number 10 spot, we have the Specialist. This is for Scout's Crossbow. This gives you more special bolts and longer special bolt duration. This is good with any of the special bolts. If you like using the special bolts like I do, then you are probably going to find this one pretty useful. I think it's actually a really good overclock too, but the amount of extra pheromone bolts you get is pretty awesome, even though they nerfed that to where you used to be able to have more pheromone bolts than regular bolts for some reason. Electric bolts are always great, and the chemical bolts are also really good. Coming in at number 9, we have another overclock for the crossbow. This is the TRIFORK Volley. This lets you fire out 3 bolts at the same time. Now, these do reduce damage, but you'll still make up with that in terms of the amount of damage you do. Downsides are that you have a slightly longer reload, which isn't too bad, and you can no longer retrieve your bolts. That one does kind of hurt because if you're trying to use this at longer ranges, it's really rough. If you're trying to use it at close range, though, it is very strong, especially if you combine it with the electric bolts and magnetic shafts. You can kill large enemies very fast with it. Plus, it is pretty fun to try to line up 3 shots at very long range. Coming in at number 8, we have Blistering Necrosis. This is for the new Wave Cooker. This one allows you to put blisters onto enemies, which then allies can break. You can also break them, and it will deal bonus damage to that enemy. I really like pairing this with the Boiler Array in Tier 5. That makes it so it's easier to actually kill targets, and then there's the % chance of Boiler Array triggering, causing an explosion, dealing damage to everything around it. I think that synergizes really well, and it has a really kind of gross but pretty cool effect too. At number 7, we have the Volatile Impact Reactor. This is a balanced overclock for the Shard Diffractor that allows you to basically have floor fire with the Shard Diffractor, which is very interesting. The Shard Diffractor already somewhat acts like the flamethrower, sort of mixed with the minigun. I like to think of this as like a Burning Hell-esque build, and it is really nice that this one has been fixed and doesn't lag your game like crazy. At least it doesn't for me. I've heard differing reports from different people. Extra floor fire is really nice, and with the increased chance of lighting things on fire, that is really good, especially since in this latest season they have given us more enemies that are weak to fire in the robots, so you do have that option. You also have the option of not just using this as a laser beam, but dragging it across enemies so that you can light the floor on fire and deal damage over time to everything in that area. I find this one both very nice and visually appealing, so yeah, probably one of my favorites. Coming in at number 6, we have the Mole. This one is probably the most straightforward overclock out of any of the overclocks, but it is a really fun overclock because of the way that it incentivizes you to play. This is a balanced overclock for the new coil gun. For Gunner, this allows you to have increased damage every time you punch through a surface to hit an enemy. You also have an increase in the amount of surface that you can punch through. So if you can punch through multiple objects, you'll stack up that damage. This is probably one of the highest damaging per shot weapons. It definitely can be the highest damaging per shot weapon, depending on how dedicated you are. And it feels like a very flexible weapon to put on most builds. So I find it a fantastic overclock. It's probably one of the strongest new overclocks that we got, and it is very fun, especially with you trying to line this all up. It gives you more strategies that you can use and better movement placement so that you can get into position. Coming in at number 5, we have Gamma Contamination. This is the radiation overclock for the Wave Cooker. This one is a very interesting one because this one is visually interesting and it gives you some interesting strategies that you can use with the Wave Cooker. You'll lose overall damage as well as magazine size, but you can now irradiate enemies. There's a percentage chance of doing this. The irradiation lasts for a surprisingly long time and does high damage per tick. It also irradiates out to other enemies, dealing damage to them, and this can work very well against crowds. It can also be quite ammo efficient if you're used to taking the time. And personally, I think it's really cool that there is another overclock that actually has radiation damage on it, so we're not just left with the mini nukes. Coming in at number 4, we have HELLFIRE. This is a really cool overclock for the coil gun. This one is an unstable overclock that allows you to light everything on fire. It feels really good to be using this against crowds. It was really strong when it was first released. It has since been nerfed, so it no longer lingers for 5 seconds, which it already had a very high chance of lighting enemies on fire, so it was really easy to light just any robots flying through the area on fire and kill them basically instantly. I understand why they nerfed it from 5 seconds to 3 seconds. Completely fair, but it still works incredibly well at just clearing up hordes and spreading fire amongst multiple enemies. I find it really useful with the stun and with the fear that the coil gun can also have in its tier 3 mods, I believe. Coming in at number 3, we have triple tech chambers. This one is another coil gun overclock and a very fun one. This one allows you to fire multiple follow-up shots if you want to after you fired your first original shot from the coil gun. So you can fire it once, then fire it twice, and if you need to, you can fire it 3 times. These 2 extra shots don't quite have the same effects that the regular first shot does from the coil gun, but they can still stack up damage, as well as they can still have lingering effects like the tier 5 electricity status effect, making it so that you're dealing extra damage over time to any enemies that are walking through it. Makes it very efficient for killing both hordes and for killing large enemies. And of course, you don't need to fire out all 3 of these shots if you don't want to. 1 shot can be fired and then go into a basic reload. 2 shots, same thing. Coming in at number 2, we have PLASCREATE Catalyst. This one is a very interesting overclock for the shard diffractor, and it's very odd the way that it has changed over time, because I originally tried this in the first beta. This was when you had to fire out the entire magazine from the shard diffractor. You didn't have a choice. That was changed to where it is now, where you can turn it off whenever you would like. This was also when this overclock originally let you bounce lasers from the shots, which was very odd, very funny, but almost completely useless in any sort of sense when you were trying to hit anything, because you usually had to look away to line up your shot so that you could potentially hit it and then hope that it hadn't moved from that spot, or that you hadn't calculated it kind of wrong. Now, what this overclock does is let you fire simply at your platforms. This will deal damage to all enemies around the platform, and then it will cause the platform to explode in a 5-meter radius, I believe, dealing very high damage to all enemies. It's a very fun and goofy overclock. It's one of those overclocks that I just love because it changes the weapon so much if you wish to use it that way, but you don't have to. You can still use it the same way you did before. This just gives you another option. And on a slightly different note, you can actually use this for mining too, similar to how you can use the mini nukes with the grenade launcher, but it does not work nearly as well. It's just something that you can do with it, which is kind of entertaining. And then number 1, I think to absolutely nobody's surprise, I picked BODKİN points. BODKİN points are by far my new favorite overclock, and probably one of my favorite overclocks in the entire game. It is a super fun overclock that seems like it has a lot of downsides, but honestly isn't that big of a deal if you plan on just using this for crowds. What BODKİN points does is now it turns your normal bolts into bolts that ricochet towards new enemies. It also seems like they've improved the pathing of the bolts as well. It wasn't always this good. Sometimes your bolts would just kind of freak out and go nowhere, or go into a wall nearby an enemy. Now it seems like they are more magnetized towards whichever enemy is closest and it can actually get to in some sort of clean, straight line. You lose out on damage and you lose out on reload speed. Reload speed does kind of suck, and the loss of damage seems really bad to start out with, but if you build it for damage, you can still one-shot, body shot normal grunts, and since this can bounce up to 2 other times, there's a very high chance that you're going to kill just normal grunts, and that can be very convenient, as well as this does do area damage. So if all 3 of these enemies are in very close proximity to one another and it doesn't kill one, it will still bounce the damage around. BODKİN points definitely reminds me of magic bullets or bullet hell, which are 2 of my absolute favorite overclocks as well. They are extremely fun to use, and they're just kind of a silly way to use the weapon. So that'll do it for the list. Thanks everybody for watching this. I really do appreciate it. I hope that you guys enjoyed this, as well as tell me what your top 10 new favorite overclocks are out of the new weapons, or do you still really like the old weapons overclocks? I do plan on making a top 10 just favorite overclocks on this channel, because one of the ones that I used to have up is not entirely valid now, since we have some new fun stuff to try. Special thanks to the supporters of this channel. These are my members over here on YouTube and my patrons over on Patreon. If you would like to become a member or a patron, there are links down in the description that will get you early access to videos just like this, and it's as low as $1 a month if you would like to join. Thanks to everybody who does that. It does help out the channel a lot. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. So take care, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.